Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only daily television platform for small businesses. We bring you the right information to empower you, the SME entrepreneur. Tonight, we're talking about the opportunities in the Agritech space for you, the SME entrepreneur, what you should know about some of the challenges and the opportunities, and what the trends for 2019 are looking like. Let me quickly introduce our expert panel here in studio, and starting with Harsh Razdan, his partner head consumer markets and internet business, KPMG India. We have Om Rotre, he's the community lead for NASSCOM. We have Devneet Bajaj, venture partner at Kalari Capital. Krishna Kumar, founder and CEO of Crop In, and we also have Saurabh Kumar, co-founder and CEO of Agritech Space. Gentlemen, such a pleasure having each of you with us here tonight in studios. And I want to first start by asking, we have two entrepreneurs, someone who has been an entrepreneur previously in this space. By asking you to introduce your businesses, let me come to you, Saurabh. What do you want our viewers to know about Agritech?
So, Agritech is at the center of innovation in terms of how the future of agri commodity or the sales and transaction would be. So one of the biggest problem across supply chain is how do you quantify the quality of produce that one is buying or selling. So that's where current methodology that exists is about you look at it and assume the quality of that particular produce, and that is the cause because of which you cannot scale it up or take it up to the next level. Sure. What we have developed is application and tools. So smartphone applications, you just take an image of that produce and it would give you the quality in terms of the entire score of what is the quality objective method.
Of course, using technology, which will be a big theme of this panel. Krishna?
So Crop In is a SaaS-based B2B agtech company. We work across 30 countries. We manage 265 crops on the platform. This ties close to 5 million acres where we are creating value. Now, when we talk about this per acre value, we say, we help the companies to digitize the complete supply chain for traceability, more control and predictability. At the same time, we will also work with the BFSI to underwrite a loan, taking, understanding much of the risk around where they're underwriting a loan to a farmer. Sure. So this is more of a AI machine learning based outcome we provide to the bank and insurance companies.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've played, as you mentioned, I've worn both hats before joining Kalari Capital as a venture partner to look at a variety of different spaces, and Agtech is one of them. I started Mitra, which was in 2012, which was into smart machinery and made fully automated sprayers and harvesters for horticulture growers, fruits and vegetables. And that is now strategically backed by Mahindra & Mahindra. And I moved on to join Kalari and give back to the startup ecosystem.
Fantastic. And since we're talking about Agritech and what really is happening in the space, I think maybe we could take a step back and define what we really mean by Agritech. And this question is both to you, Om, as well as to you, Harsh. What do we mean by Agritech? Because there are different aspects and areas where technology can really be used in the agriculture space. What's the definition really?
I guess we don't need a singular definition.
Okay, there's no market definition per se.
We don't even need one because at NASSCOM, we look at Agritech as something which should have an ICT component.
Sure.
But that's because we are an IT industry body. A startup India or a government body can probably look at Agritech a little differently, which is also all right, because traditional innovation is also technology. So we don't need a singular definition.
Okay, agree?
The way I look at it is that, you have a situation in this world around food and agri. 11% of our land is agricultural, 30% is arable, is declining rapidly by 20%. You have huge constraint on resources. The nourished population is going to go up. Anything that sorts it out is going to be Agritech. It can be anything in this domain, all the entrepreneurs here, but sort it out for us, for this larger world, and sort of that's Agritech.
No, I think the lines get blurred a bit because when you look at companies like Swiggy and Big Basket, all raising big rounds of capital. That for me is food tech. Okay. Anything that goes from the farm all the way into the city before it is brought to the end customer, for me, is agriculture technology. Sure. So it's good to differentiate because we talk about big funding going into food tech and ag tech, but it's important to differentiate that.
Okay, yeah. So it's no brainer in terms of the challenges that the agri space in India is facing. But before we come in, and discuss that, I want to talk about what perhaps is working for India. At least the headline is looking good, that India is among the top 6 globally, which has seen the most deals. And you were making that distinction as well. And if you look at the other 5 countries, they're all developed nations. What do you think perhaps is working in our favor? And this is open to all of you gentlemen on the panel.
We, as venture capital investors at Kalari, we see 3 trends at play right now. One is that the digital infrastructure, in terms of the penetration of smartphones, India stack facilitating that as well, and data becoming a fraction of cost, what it was 5 years ago, is allowing entrepreneurs to interact with farmers and food companies and have reached that last mile, which was the biggest challenge earlier. So that digital infrastructure. Then horticulture growth is a second trend that we see, which is very important, that as my friends here know, that fruits and vegetables on a per acre basis give you a lot of value. And horticulture is now overtaken food grain production in the country. So farmers are actually armed with a lot more disposable income to be able to afford technology, and food companies as well. And third, obviously, are the government initiatives, I think, that we'll talk about. But these three factors are at play.
You're saying it's working in India's favor definitely. At NASSCOM, how do you really view this space in terms of what is working for us? At least the headline is looking good.
No, I'll say it's a bold new batch of entrepreneurs. I mean, I'll say Krishna, when back in 2010, he started with Agritech startup. I mean, it was really bold. There was no market incentives, there was no funding. Agritech as a definition did not exist for the government or other traditional funders. So to sustain that and to grow without any massive funding for 7-8 years, I mean, you know, the funding that we have seen has only come in last 3-4 years.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, 3 years. So,
sure.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what is not working, and everyone knows the data, 14% contribution as far as the GDP is concerned, but hasn't really grown much. The productivity is not much. Yield again has been you know, following, and that's something both of you gentlemen as entrepreneurs also look at. But for the sake of our viewers, and this is open to all of you, 1 or 2 of the top challenges that you think need to be fixed urgently. What is crucial in your mind if we have to move forward, if more entrepreneurs are to enter into the agri-tech space? What needs to be fixed urgently? Harsh.
I think one of the big things is our investment around R&D in agriculture. Okay. You know, I think if you look at numbers for our country, you talk about 0.3% of GDP going into agriculture. It's half of China. The US is 4 times. Countries like Brazil, South Africa, 10 times. I think we as a country are struggling between what is necessary, you know, what do you have to do immediately, short term, versus what is good for the long term. And then when you rewind into research, you realize that anything into long term is like R&D is 10 times more effective than distortionary subsidies. I think so. I think one thing which I think we should debate about and think through is our balance between short-term initiatives that we pick up and what we do to support longer-term growth for the sector. Okay,
we seem to be seeing a lot of short-term announcements on the part of the government, at least, you know, minimum income support, etc., being announced. But in your mind, sort of maybe what really needs to get fixed?
So I'll add on to the point in terms of R&D. So like what is there, that there are a lot of innovations that exist in universities, and a lot of them have got huge commercial possibility. But that information, so knowledge gap is one of the biggest, whether it is from to the farmers, from government to farmers, or even in whatever is commercially available or can be developed. So we need a system to for information dissemination, whether it is that for entrepreneurs like us, that these are the things which is available or research which is available, which we can actually deploy in the market, or for farmers in terms of knowledge gap, that okay, these are the practices that needs to be there, sure, and you need to accept that.
Sure.
I think there should be a more flow of you know, investment and money going to the farmer as a loan, because if as he mentioned that, you know, there is very less money for the R&D. If you look at, every farmer has got a factory. They're producing something of their 1 acre, right? And every farm can be a kind of a lab where they're experimenting. If they don't have enough money in their pocket to do some experiments, to change the crop or to adopt some new technology. So let's say we can give a best of best advisory, but if he doesn't have money to spend at that amount of time, the crop can move very fast and he will not get the desired results. Okay. So I think we need to really look at how we can penetrate with the fintech, like we have early salary. Can we create something like that for the farmer, where technology can play a role and bank can you know, take a major risk and you know, reach out to mass of the farmers, and still they are profitable because servicing those kind of small loans also. Sure. I think money should flow down.
So we've spoken about funding very briefly, but I think most of the conversations that an entrepreneur is having really, and correct me if I'm wrong, is around how to raise funds and where the money is really coming in from. Krishna, I noticed that you, for instance, and I was just going through the list of investors and backers that you have, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for instance, now is putting in money. But what's that experience been like in terms of raising funds?
So if I talk about my journey from 2010, we are hardly having any funds who are devoted towards the agtech that point of time. So there was no agtech specific fund, and the word was there, and mostly the impact investors were coming forward with little money to invest that point of time. Lately, what I've seen that mainstream VCs have got interested in this whole agtech business, because for the first very matter is that it's a massive industry, and there's a B2C angle, there is a B2B angle, and it's really creating and with the changing infrastructure as well, like telecom penetration, smartphone coming down to the villages, internet coming there. So it has become a very interesting proposal right now. So recently we got Chirate Venture, which was formerly known as ID Venture, and then Melinda Gates Strategic Investment Funds. It was not a grant, it was mostly a equity investment.
Sure.
And that showed that there are people in the mainstream who are thinking very deep about agtech, and the time has come.
Okay.
So it was though difficult in the early days, but I see there are a lot of interest now in the market.
Sure.
So I would say that it's easier than earlier, but easier is a relative term. So still, if we look at mainstream VCs, they are in a watch mode, exploration mode, finding out if there exists something which they can bet on. Second, in terms of mindset that exists is about that, do we actually have an ability or a patience to wait for a longer period, or do we need a return at a very short period? So that's, I think, one thing which will resolve, and the mainstream VCs would understand that agtech is something which will take time. That is when it would become far more easier.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to take a very quick break on that note, but we will continue talking about opportunities and challenges for SME entrepreneurs in the agtech space. Do stay tuned. Back in just a bit. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Tonight on The Crux, we're talking about the opportunities, challenges and trends in 2019 for entrepreneurs in the agtech space. Dev, Krishna was saying, VCs are increasingly looking at agtech. Kalari definitely is looking at the agtech space. Just very briefly, if you can talk about, what your views when it comes to the Agritech funding space.
Yeah, sure. So, look, I am an optimist as far as this sector goes, which is why I started a company in this space. And I think Kalari, everybody in the team shares the same passion that we will be seeing, if not a couple unicorns, but maybe a couple of $100 million businesses coming out of this space in the next 5 years. Just to talk about numbers, $200 million has been invested into agtech over the last 3 years. That number was next to nothing when we started our businesses, Krishna. Yeah. And 350 VC-backed companies. So there is positive momentum. What needs to happen now is that entrepreneurs and VCs need to be consciously building scalable models, which means good scaled. People have to think about at least 200-300 crores in turnover, whether that market is all for India or India is used as a lab to start things, and that technology is taken abroad, like in Krishna's case. We need to be thinking about scale. Unit economics need to make sense, which means that we need to be selling and making money on every rupee that we sell.
Sure.
And then finally, as in an ecosystem, the team has to have the founding teams need to have the longevity and the thought process to think about 10 years about building a business.
Sure.
So if these boxes are checked, there are 4 or 5 very interesting sectors that I can talk to you about that we at Kalari are watching and tracking within the agtech space. Okay. Yeah.
You're nodding along with that, Om. You agree? You're positive as well about the funding that's coming in?
This sector is very different. The way we look at e-commerce at any fintech sector, we have to have different lenses for this sector. One point is, so far, less than 10% has gone to growth stage startups. That needs to change because, so far the money has gone to seed stage startups. Second, funding will be critical, but I will like to look at it differently because estimates say by 2020, the digital agriculture business will be worth $45 billion in India itself. So, whether funding will decide how the sector grows, I'm not too sure. It has a momentum of its own.
Sure. Okay. Another thing that I want to talk about quickly, Harsh, this is primarily to you, but everyone can, sort of jump in on this question as well, is the use of technology. We have spoken about technology briefly, but my question to you is, in what stages perhaps should an entrepreneur who's in this industry look at using technology, or are the challenges in India so different from anywhere else in the world when it comes to the agri space, and therefore the solutions that are needed, which are perhaps, not using technology? What should really an entrepreneur in this space look at?
So I think there are a few challenges which we have to acknowledge as a country. I'm not saying that we're very different from the world, but in one way we are also different. I think one would be around, we don't have as much a literate population as you would see in other parts of the world. If research shows that around 45% of the rural agriculture women can't still even read a line in a native language. 25% of the adult males can't read a line in a native language. So imagine if an entrepreneur goes down trying to talk to him or her about things, how are you supposed to communicate? So I think there are basic issues which will not be similar to the US or other countries, which I think our colleagues would have to deal about. I think the second thing, and Saurabh also pointed out, our land holdings are small. So it's a plus and a minus. The negative part would be that you don't get economies of scale. So if you start talking to each and every farmer, how are you supposed to become profitable? How are you supposed to get scale? So again, that's something to be thought through. It's going to be a little different from what we see abroad. And thirdly, I think a big challenge would be in terms of how we as a population, the government deals with this. Is it going to be short term versus long term? What kind of signals are we giving to entrepreneurs and to venture capitalists? Do they see hope in terms of redeeming themselves over a longer period of time, or are we still going to be banking on distortionary schemes of solar pumps being subsidized, etc.? So I think we are different in one way. I still remain cautiously optimistic about the sector, but a lot of work or a lot of work will have to go into it.
Saurabh was talking about, for instance, the use of smartphones. And also the use of then, rural languages for each of the areas or the sort of segments that the markets that you're servicing really. What's the role there? What sort of opportunities there? What sort of innovation would you like to see entrepreneurs doing in that space?
So I think he's picked up the right point. More and more, it's all about vernacular. And I think, honestly, whether it means looking at data, looking at seed crop, looking at how you sort of identify diseases in crops, I think everything's going to be vernacular beyond a point. This is not the audience which is going to be serviced by our agricultural entrepreneurs. So clearly a huge scope. We'll have to understand what the consumer need is, be flexible on vernacular language, focus our energy and go after it. Okay. So huge opportunity, but it's also a challenge if you look at that.
Sure.
If I could add to that, Sunanda, I think I fully agree with your last point in your question that we have to come up with India-specific, or as we say at Kalari, Hindustan Hamara kind of models. And we have to design solutions for AgTech in India. We like 4 or 5 spaces in this. So we think digital marketplaces with the use of smartphones, inputs or outputs, will scale because those are large markets. And if we can digitize even a small portion of that, makes a huge effect. If you include lending or value-added services into that, then the marketplace becomes more effective. We think that IoT-driven devices, meaning small smart devices that are placed in farms and they give data back to food companies, and the food companies can actually pay for the data, are great for entrepreneurs to use as B2B2F models to help scale. And obviously, ag fintech. A lot of fintech is in urban markets right now, as Harsha was saying. If we can actually reconcentrate on the rural market and provide technology to get loans, provide insurance products, credit scoring for the rural market, that's also going to be very interesting. And finally, the space that I was in, that Saurabh is also in, is smart devices, precision agriculture, where Mitra, we were making fully automated sprayers, as I talked about. The more and more technology that goes in on the farm to make output more predictable is very, very valuable, because companies like Big Basket and all are now coming and backward integrating, and they want reliable supply.
So ITC has been doing that.
ITC has been doing that, So one of our businesses, AgNext, which was our first investment, has ITC as a customer, and they're providing these devices. So there are a lot of encouraging areas within which we can find pockets of value.
Okay. One thing I would perhaps maybe I could ask Om to comment on is the fact that there don't seem to be too many women entrepreneurs in the AgTech space. As someone who's so closely associated with entrepreneurs here, why is that? How's that going to change?
There are no simple answers. I guess the representation of women in the tech sector across segments has been low, but it's on the rise. So now we run a very focused series called Women in Tech. at NASCOM. So we kind of we talk about, I mean, what are the problem areas, why are they not participating, and what are the challenges, and how can we promote them and bring them into the spotlight. Okay. So that's been our effort all through last 2 years, and we'll scale it up this year.
Sure. Okay. We're running out of time on this panel, but I definitely want to talk of the role of the government beyond just giving SOPs, beyond having a minimum support price, beyond coming up with, short-term, maybe targeted political sort of moves, measures, announcements. What is the role of the government when it comes to the life of an agri-tech entrepreneur? What should the government be doing? What is the government doing right now, perhaps, to help you, whether it's funding, whether it's easy access to technology, and what do you hope to see really changing?
I would say one part is in terms of access to data, because government holds huge amount of data across different sectors. So that is one. Second is in terms of policy measures, that there are a lot of state subject policies that actually restricts working in different segments. That's two. And third part is government in itself is the largest customer, you can say, or buyer of the agri-produce. So actually promoting agri-tech startups to actually participate in the businesses that they are in. So that's three areas which I believe is good support for us.
Okay, I'm going to take closing comments at this point, and I want to come to you first, Harsh, and talk about the role of technology when it comes to reducing, the wastage as far as storage is concerned, supply side really challenges that you're facing. That's something we didn't touch upon in this panel. How can those two be sort of married together? What should be done very quickly in 30 seconds? Maybe the one thing that needs to be fixed to do that.
I think the big thing we have to get after is investing around infrastructure for the long term. Okay. Supply chain, cold chain infrastructure, that would be one thing. And the second thing I would say is educate farmers in terms of what is best practice. Even education and telling what the other person does and you don't do is a big thing for us. So these two things will fall in place. I think we go a long way in terms of our country.
They've briefly spoke about B2B2F previously. So my question to you is, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to adoption really of technology? Do you think maybe the end users are also resistant, apart from the fact that you have the infrastructure challenges, you have the funding challenges, etc.? How can that be overcome?
I'll probably see it as more of a, not as a challenge, but as a positive issue, because everybody says a small Indian farmer will not pay for a technology solution. We have Ek Gaon who charged a small farmer 120 rupees for a crop cycle, and they provided customized weather data back in 2010. So, and now, so that's already happened. Sure. And second, we look at technology players also to work as aggregators. So they are not going to work with small farmers, but they're going to work with the land size. So let's say now cropping represents 5 million acres, right? So that becomes one aggregated customer base. So that's how we see the model scaling up. And so we don't see small land sizes or a illiterate farmer being a challenge.
All right, that wraps up our show tonight. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. If you have any feedback for us, there's so much more to discuss in the Agritech space. Do let us know your thoughts. leadersoftomorrowtimesgroup.com is our email ID. Reach us also on social media. Tweet at me at Sunanda_J or LOT_ET now. Reach us on Facebook, Leaders of Tomorrow on ET now. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.